Linda, why don't you start for us?
Andrew, can you please start?
Echo?
The camera's already rolling.
Okay, wait, I'll read it then. Okay. Iranian artists today are producing works that defy the pigeonhole, testifying to a new generation's ingenuity and moving past what some critics have coined the pornographic realm of arts production. That is the circulation of images and ideas that tend to perpetuate the image of a victimized people.
I think the reason why Angela thought this quote was significant is because, like, even for me, like, I've seen a lot of artists portray, like, Iranian culture as a culture that's kind of victimized by other, like, victimized, like, literally by, like, violence, but also figuratively by, like, stereotypes. But I think what the author is trying to say, that this might actually have a negative effect, like, because they show only these pornographic images. It seems like their culture is actually made up like that, and their culture is actually victimized when there are other certain aspects of that culture. So I think, like, what it's trying to say is Iranian artists are becoming, like, more modern and trying to steer away judgments by showing, like, different aspects and not showing, like, these types of images.
I agree with Nicole. I think basically what it's saying, like the paragraph right in front of it, it talked about like the stereotypes and like how people judge Iran by like those stereotypical images and facts. And so basically, I think today's Iranian artists are basically trying to promote originality and promote arts that doesn't show what I like the stereotypical Iran, but rather more, I guess, civilized and the different sides of their culture.
I agree with both Nicole and Linda, and I feel that this is, in addition to what they said, it's also sort of. I think the author is trying to emphasize this point by putting it in the beginning, because it says that they're producing works that defy the pigeonhole and the pornographic realm of arts production. So I think it's also a sort of call to action for people to recognize these works that Iranian artists are putting out and sort of break that sort of stereotype.
Yeah, so basically I chose this quote because I liked how Iran was compared to a pigeonhole, and like arts, it showed how like the power of arts, of how arts can actually like prove something different, especially in this age of time where like Iran is not completely the image that we think of like in the past.
My quote is like the next sentence. Okay, so prominent among these ideas is the notion that Iran is a sealed vacuum of repression, and therefore that any art production emanating from within its bounds is a hysterical reaction to that reality. In other words, cry for us because our fates are so bad.
Do I comment?
Yes.
Good comment.
I was gonna choose a quote too. Like
Well, too bad.
I thought it was significant because it basically describes what the art's about, like that it's a vacuum, sealed vacuum of repression, and therefore it has those hysterical reactions to reality. It talks about how it talks about the people's emotions and responses to their situation in Iran. So it basically summarizes the stories of their art. They're trying to convey to the audience. So I thought that was significant.
I think it's important to note the sentence that comes after it, because like this sentence itself can send the wrong idea. If you read the sentence after, it says, in fact, there is no reason to lament. Iranian visual arts have been thriving, particularly in the last decade. So I think it's important to note that the phrase "cry for us because our fates are so bad" is another sort of misconception that Azimi is trying to point out, and you have to recognize that it's not something that is true for these Iranian artists.
And I just thought that like this quote like basically meant that like Iran, like any art that doesn't like clearly show what it is within like the bounds that Iran has set for itself, but it's just a hysterical reaction, and so that like we need to somehow realize that like through these arts, like Iran is not the not composed of the stereotypes like it is.
Yeah, Lai Sing once said like this is one of the misconceptions and like the judgments people make when looking at like Iranian art, and I think what it's trying to say is that like because of like the certain prejudices they have before like looking at a piece of art, it kind of restricts them from realizing what the artist is actually trying to say. So like many people, like the public, don't understand the real message behind the art because like they have this like preconception of Iran.
So my quote is on the last page, like the last page, 111. The last sentence too. It says, "These original movements, while often hidden from the wider art-consuming public, testify to the fact that with Iran, we must ultimately leave our tiny preconceptions at the door." So this is basically summing up what Nicole said about how, like,
Yeah, this is basically something up what Nicole said about. Yeah, but this is pretty much, this is like the last two sentences, and as a conclusion, like she said, it basically does. It does like wrap up everything. It's sending the message that we should leave our tidy preconception, which means that we shouldn't be biased when we look at this art. And it says this is just the beginning. So, like I said before, the author is calling to action. He wants people to realize the bias that they have, and in that way they can get rid of it and interpret it in a different perspective.
Yeah, and I also just think that it's saying that like not only with Iran but like any other country or any other like controversial issue, like we have to make sure that we're not biased just because of like what's portrayed on the media, and that we have to like open up to the reality that we may not know.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, I agree with Singon and Angela, and I think what it's trying to say is that like it's really modern now, so that even like and not educated person might still think, you know, Egyptians live in pyramids and whatnot. But like an educated person will know that like it's modern now and times have changed, and that like even Iran, like it has different aspects to its culture other than like people like getting victimized. Like they have to, you know, tidy preconceptions at the door.
Yeah, so I thought since it's the conclusion and it's the last two sentences, I thought basically they're restating their thesis, which is that one should not view the world from like a certain glass. So yeah, we shouldn't be biased. We shouldn't have prejudice against.
Okay, mine is on page 109. If you look on the second paragraph, it is pervaded with aesthetic expression that tends to privilege the countryside over the city.
Which one?
Oh, here, second paragraph. It is pervaded. It is pervaded with aesthetic expression that tends to privilege the countryside over the city, and marked by a symbolism that sometimes hits you over the head, generally emphasizing the preconceptions that you may have about Iran from the perspective of, say, New York or Paris.
Why?
Whichever Iranian artists are facing up to their own. Can you kind of explain the code before you call?
Explain the quote.
So basically, I think it's talking about like I think you have to consider the paragraph itself like as a whole. So if you read from above, it says Iranian artists are facing onto their own realities rather than others' imagined pornographic realities, and basically talking about how they emphasize the bias that people might have, like the misconceptions that we all talked about Iran. That's how that's different from New York and Paris, and how these artists have to keep that in mind while they're working and publishing their art.
So we have different perceptions from those in the States.
No, like people look at Iran differently than they would at like New York or Paris.
So it's basically what we talked about the
Yeah.
whole time.
So basically, like due to like these like controversial like talks and like media, it's basically saying that Iran is portrayed more negatively than like New York or other Paris, where
if
it's
we-
more
no,
idealized.
It's like when we live in New York or in Paris, we have that certain image of Iran that's really like negative images, right?
Yeah.
Like negative connotations. So we shouldn't look at it in that way. Like Iranian artists shouldn't look at it in that perspective. They should look at it in a original.
I think when it says like aesthetic expression that tends to privilege the countryside over the city, like it's what Linda was talking about, how like people in the countryside may have fewer access to like the media and like publications and just like really like educated opinions about like Iran and what's happening. So like they might in fact be the ones that have a clear image and an unbiased like image of Iran's culture instead of like
What's in the city?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's your?
You already said it.
Yeah. Okay, we're done. Thank you.